Late 16th century, the bells of Seville do not ring for God, they ring for silver. On the Guadalquivir River, a forest of masts crowds the horizon. Galleons, scarred by storms and corsairs, crawl toward the quay. Their hulls ride low in the water, heavy with metal ripped from the bones of another continent. On the docks, the rumor moves faster than the tide. The treasure fleet has arrived. Spain is saved. Again, crowds jam the waterfront. Priests raise crosses. Nobles in embroidered cloaks press forward. Dock workers strain on the ropes as gangplanks slam down. The smell of tar, sweat, and salt mixes with incense as the first chests are dragged down the planks and stacked like captured trophies. Inside the counting rooms of Seville, the spectacle is only a distraction. Behind thick stone walls, royal treasurers and city bankers bend over ledgers. They watch two worlds exist on the same page. On one side, incoming treasure measured in tons. On the other, unpaid soldiers, overdue loans, pensions, annuities, interest charges that climb faster than the ships can unload. They see what the cheering crowds cannot. The treasure fleet is not a miracle. It is a lifeline tied to a drowning man. Spain thinks it has found infinite wealth. In reality, it has discovered something more dangerous: leverage. This is a kingdom fresh from the Reconquista, raised on steel and scripture. The ideal Spaniard is not a merchant. He is a warrior, a land-owning noble who lives from rents and honor, not from ledgers and trade. The empire stretches from the Andes to the Philippines, stitched together with conquest and justified as the work of God. So when the silver begins to flow from the New World, it feels less like luck and more like confirmation. Proof that Spain has been chosen. Proof that the old way of life does not need to change. Why cultivate a nation of producers when the mines will pay the bills? Why build workshops and shipyards when the ocean delivers coin straight to the quay? Yet, even in these triumphant years, warning lights flicker. Market stalls whisper the first alarm. Grain cloth, iron tools all, a little more expensive than last season. Artisans complain that leather costs more, that charcoal is dear, that rent has risen faster than wages. Inside palaces and ministries, a pattern is already forming. Each convoy that appears on the river does not erase Spain's problems. It merely postpones them. The bullion plugs tax gaps. It pays foreign creditors. It keeps armies moving, and the royal court glittering. The treasure fleet is not building a future. It is paying for a present that Spain cannot otherwise afford. That is the paradox at the heart of this story. An empire that controls rivers of bullion will end the century impoverished and indebted. A country that seems to own the world's money will discover that it has been quietly financing other people's power. To understand how, we have to follow the metal down into the shafts of distant mountains, along the paths of forced labor, across oceans, through counting houses, into the vaults of rival states. This is not just the tale of Spain. It is the anatomy of a resource curse. And it begins in a single mountain that should have made a nation rich and instead started the slow work of destroying it. To see where this river of metal begins, we have to leave the warm light of Seville and climb into the thin air of the Andes. High on a barren plateau stands a mountain locals call the Rich Hill. From a distance, it looks like any other gray peak. Up close, it is laced with open wounds, fay shafts, tunnels, scars where the rock has been torn apart. This is the core of Spain's power. Not palaces, not cathedrals, but a pit in the earth. Around it, a brutal machine is built. Indigenous villagers are torn from their homes by draft quotas and forced marches. They descend into tunnels where the air is poison, and the shifts are measured not in hours but in days. Above ground, overseers count bodies and loads, converting human lives into units of ore. From the very first step, the Spanish silver system is an extraction engine. Value pulled upward from coerced labor to colonial officials, then to the crown, then onward to creditors. Yet brute labor is only half the story. The other half is alchemy. The raw ore in this mountain is not pure metal. It is a dusty mix of rock useless without refinement. The breakthrough comes with mercury, hauled from distant mines and tipped into vast grinding pits. Crushed stone is mixed with mercury until it turns into a gray sludge. Men and boys wade through it barefoot, trampling it for hours as poison seeps into their skin. Slowly and visibly, tiny particles of silver cling to the mercury. The waste is washed away, and the metal is boiled out. It is the 16th century's version of an industrial plant. What once trickled now floods. Every year, more silver pours out of the mountain than entire kingdoms had minted in centuries. The supply of money explodes. But here is the quiet twist. The supply of shoes, tools, ships, and grain does not explode with it. From these pits the metal flows to mints. Furnaces roar as bars are melted and stamped with royal symbols. The coins that leave these halls are a simple, ruthless technology. Each contains a predictable amount of silver. Each carries the authority of a distant king that makes them easy to trust. Galleons become the arteries of the system, from the mines to colonial treasuries, from there to port cities. Then across the Atlantic, the flow is disciplined and relentless. Convoys sail on strict schedules clustered together for protection, insurance policies and prayers layered over cannon and wood. But beneath the surface, another story is unfolding. Insurance contracts in Antwerp and Genoa price the risk of every voyage. Banking houses in Italy and Germany arrange advances on future shipments, writing claims on silver that has not yet left the mountain. Northern shipbuilders design faster vessels to chase or protect the convoys. With each cycle, foreign financiers and merchants carve out their share. For the Spanish crown, the temptation is irresistible. Each new vein discovered, each technological improvement in refining, looks like confirmation that the machine can spin forever. Budgets are drawn up as if the mountain will never empty, as if storms will never sink a fleet, as if enemies will never seize a cargo. The state begins to live not on what it produces, but on what this machine can rip from the ground thousands of miles away. The silver system looks like strength. In reality, it is a narrow bridge, one mine, one technology, one dangerous ocean, carrying the weight of an empire that is learning to depend on a geological accident for its daily survival. When the first galleons unloaded their treasure, prices in Spain barely moved. For a time, it really did feel like free money. The same bread, the same boots, the same woolen cloaks all suddenly easier to buy. Then something subtle began to happen. In markets from Seville to Valladolid, vendors quietly raised their prices. A loaf that once cost a single coin now required two. Rents crept upward. The cost of iron tools jumped. At first, people blamed greedy landlords, corrupt officials, the usual suspects. But the real culprit was arithmetic. The volume of silver coins in circulation was exploding. The stock of real goods, wheat harvests, livestock, cloth, timber, was not. More money chased the same amount of things. The result was the same then as it is now: inflation. To a peasant laborer, it felt like a magic trick gone wrong. There was more metal in the village than ever before, yet his wages bought less. He could hold in his hand coins his grandfather would have considered unimaginable wealth and still go to bed hungry. Spain was richer in symbol, poorer in substance. For artisans and farmers, the pain was even sharper. The leather for a pair of shoes now cost more, the iron for tools, the wool for cloth, the grain to feed apprentices, everything was dearer. To survive, craftsmen raised their prices. But beyond Spain's borders, in France, England, and the Low Countries, the money flood was weaker. Producers there could still make goods with cheaper inputs. Silently, Spain's workshops began to lose their customers. Cloth from northern looms undercut local weavers. Foreign cannon and muskets proved cheaper than those made at home. Even basic goods arrived on foreign hulls, paid for with Spanish coin. The empire was turning into a conduit. Silver surged in through the southern ports, swirled briefly through Spanish hands, then flowed outward again to pay for goods and interest abroad. On the balance sheets of Europe, Spain looked wealthy. In reality, it was a transit point, a mouth through which the riches of the New World passed on their way to other people's ledgers. Culture adjusted to the new reality, and not for the better. In Northern Europe, the ideal man of the age was the merchant, the shipowner, the innovator who turned ideas into trade and trade into profit. In Spain, the ideal remained the hidalgo the minor noble with just enough land to avoid working with his hands, the man whose pride rested on lineage, not on productivity. As silver pumped easy money into the veins of the state, that ideal crept downward. Young men dreamed less of opening workshops and more of securing a pension, a post in the bureaucracy, a sinecure near the royal court or the customs office, where the silver arrived. The dream was not to build, but to position oneself as close as possible to the faucet. Contemporary writers filled their stories with hungry nobles who starved in fine clothes rather than soil their status with trade. The message was clear in a country gorging on other people's output. Work itself became suspect. Taxation followed the same warped path. A healthy state taxes a broad productive base. Spain's productive base was shrinking. The crown leaned on sales taxes, on fees, on squeezing what remained of Castile's peasants and artisans, and above all, on the mines. When harvests failed or trade slowed, there was little cushion. Revenues lurched with the convoys. By the late 16th century, the silver miracle was already showing its other face. Prices were unstable. Domestic industry was eroding. The social contract was fraying, yet on the surface the ships kept coming, the processions kept marching, the palaces kept glittering. It looked like prosperity. It felt like decadence. Underneath, a simple truth was tightening like a noose. Spain had built a society on spending found money, not earned strength. And soon, That habit would be tested by the most expensive addiction of all war fought on credit, financed with tomorrow's silver. Easy money does not just change prices, it changes ambitions. In Madrid and in the grim palace of El Escorial, the Spanish monarch does not see himself as a mere king. He imagines himself as the blunt instrument of heaven, defender of the true faith, shield against heretics and infidels. In a world fracturing along religious lines, that identity comes with a price tag measured in fleets and armies. Armadas are dispatched into the Atlantic. Tercios march north to crush rebellion in the Low Countries. Galleys row east to face Ottoman fleets in the Mediterranean. Each battlefield is hundreds or thousands of miles from the mines that pay for it. Every campaign needs food, weapons, gunpowder, uniforms, ships, fortifications, bribes, subsidies to allies. This is where the earlier choices return to haunt the empire. Spain's own industries cannot meet the demand. Inflation and cultural disdain for trade have hollowed out its workshops. So the crown does what seems most natural: it pays foreign merchants. Dutch, Italian, German, and English contractors supply cannon, anchors, masts, rope, grain. Spanish silver keeps their foundries and shipyards humming. An empire of warriors is quietly hiring an empire of capitalists to equip it. At first, so long as the convoys arrive, this system can be sustained. But war consumes cash faster than mines can produce it. Battles drag on, rebellions refuse to die, storms scatter ships. The treasury begins to live, not on what has arrived, but on what it expects to arrive. This is the birth of the Asiento mentality. Unable to wait for each fleet, the crown turns to the only people willing to advance large sums quickly. Europe's private banking dynasties, Genoese, German, and Flemish houses form consortia that offer the king something like a modern line of credit. In exchange for a promise secured on future silver, they hand over cash today. On paper, it is simple. The crown signs contracts pledging a share of the next convoys. In return, it gets money to pay troops, build ships, and keep the machinery of war running. Interest rates are high-fay, sometimes outrageously high-fay. But the silver seems endless, and defeat feels unthinkable. It is always easier to sign another promise than to raise unpopular taxes or scale back ambitions. The political logic is intoxicating. Wars are decided by today's forces, not next year's budgets. Credit lets a monarch act as if the future is already paid for. But beneath this convenience lies a trap. Each new loan slices into future bullion before it even leaves the New World. Chests that arrive in Seville are already spoken for, claimed by contracts in distant banking houses. The silver touches Spanish soil, then flows almost immediately back out to settle debts and service interest. The balance quietly shifts. Creditors begin to dictate terms. They demand control over tax revenues, monopolies on certain trades, the right to collect customs directly, priority access to incoming treasure. The King of Spain still commands armies, but over his finances he is no longer fully sovereign. From the throne, the empire still looks immense. Maps on the wall glow with Spanish colors. Ministers speak of honor, destiny, divine duty. But the spreadsheet tells another story. Interest payments swelling year after year, devouring a larger share of the mountain's output, leaving less and less for anything else. The empire is now running on tomorrow's money. All it will take is one bad year, one lost fleet, one failed campaign, and the carefully stacked promises will begin to fall. In a world where reputation is currency, a single royal decision will soon trigger something no one has seen on this scale before. A state will go bankrupt, not because its mines ran dry overnight, but because its leaders spent the future faster than the present could catch up. And then the breaking point arrived. The king's wars have sprawled across decades. The treasure fleets have been late, scattered, captured, or sunk. Banking houses whisper of overexposure. The arithmetic can no longer be massaged away. On the royal desk, the numbers do not add up. One decree changes everything, in a formal announcement cloaked in pious language. The crown declares a suspension of payments. Royal debts are frozen, contracts annulled, obligations restructured. Behind the ritual words lies a simple fact. Spain, the terror of Europe and master of the Indies, is telling its creditors that it will not pay what it owes, at least not on the terms agreed. The shock ripples outward like a cannon blast. In major financial hubs, counting houses go silent. Ledgers suddenly full of royal paper are now full of holes. Banking families that lent to the most powerful monarch in Christendom discover that power is not collateral. One sovereign decision has detonated their balance sheets. Markets seize up, credit evaporates, merchants postpone shipments, interest rates jerk upward across the continent. It is the 16th century version of a systemic financial crisis, centered not on a stock exchange, but on a single overextended empire. Yet the default changes less than it should. Wars do not end. Armies still need pay, the court still demands splendor, the king still believes he has a divine mission. When the immediate panic subsides, the same banking houses or their rivals drift back. They demand harsher terms, higher interest, more collateral. The empire, having revealed that it is willing to walk away from its promises, must now bribe the world to lend to it again. Meanwhile, another set of creditors is making its displeasure known not with contracts, but with gunpowder. In garrisons far from Madrid, soldiers wait for pay that never arrives. Months stretch into years. They have marched, bled, and watched friends die under banners embroidered with the royal arms. And now there is nothing in the pay chest. Discipline, like finance, runs on trust. Once that trust breaks, orders are just sound. In a great commercial city under Spanish control, the tension snaps. Troops, mutiny, they pillage warehouses, burn homes, and slaughter civilians. It is not an enemy sack, but a collection notice in steel and fire. Unpaid soldiers settle their accounts directly with the nearest source of wealth. Back home, the crown reaches for a new tool. If too much silver is bleeding abroad, why not pay the common people in something cheaper? The mints begin to produce a new flood of coins, small copper pieces, stamped with royal symbols, but containing little or no precious metal. By decree, they are to circulate at values far higher than their substance warrants. For the treasury, it looks clever. With the stroke of a pen, the state can finance itself by printing inferior money and forcing its subjects to accept it at face value. It is a hidden tax on trust. On the street, the reality is brutal. Prices lurch again. Those who can, hoard real silver and demand payment in bullion or foreign coin. Those who cannot are trapped in a shrinking copper world where money buys less each month. The economy splits in two, a hard currency sphere of the connected and powerful, and a junk, money sphere for everyone else. By the time the crown stumbles through yet another cycle of default and renewed borrowing, something irreversible has happened. Spain's name on a bond now means risk. Its coins mean uncertainty. Its armies mean potential chaos, not order. The empire still owns mines, ships, and territories. But the invisible asset that once made it the center of European finance, trust in its promises, has been spent down past recovery. Imagine the flow of silver not as a river feeding one valley, but as a current encircling the globe, from American mines to Iberian ports, then onward to Amsterdam, London, Genoa, and beyond to Istanbul and the markets of Asia. Spanish coins change hands again and again. Each time, someone else uses them to build something lasting. In Northern Europe, merchants do not see silver as an end. They see it as seed capital. In Amsterdam, Spanish pieces are deposited in new, sophisticated banks. Those banks re-lend the metal to shipowners, textile producers, and entrepreneurs making lenses, maps, and scientific instruments. Joint stock companies are born, allowing investors to pool risk across multiple ventures. Insurance contracts and futures markets evolve to tame uncertainty. In London, similar patterns begin. Spanish coins pay for dry docks, foundries, and experiments in coal and iron that will one day power an industrial revolution. Each bar of bullion that leaves Seville and never returns becomes part of someone else's infrastructure, someone else's technology, someone else's institutions. Spain dug the silver. Others built the future with it. Back in Castile, the contrast sharpens with every decade. Towns that once bustled with looms and traders grow quiet. Population stagnates, then declines. Fields lie fallow as peasants flee taxes, conscription, or simple hopelessness. Administration buildings stand, but the activity inside them shrinks to the management of scarcity. The mines themselves begin to fade. The richest veins are exhausted. Costs rise as galleries go deeper and dangers increase. Output falls, even as the state's obligations, pensions, interest, military commitments remain structured for the boom years. There is no diversified industrial base to fall back on, no deep merchant class, no culture of broad-based investment. The empire has grown old without ever having truly grown up economically. Abroad, the perception shifts. The fearsome Habsburg colossus, whose armies once shook Europe, comes to be seen as ponderous, indebted, slow. Diplomats speak of Spain as a declining power. Its rivals, financed in part by its own former bullion, carve away at its influence. Piece by piece, territories slip away. Autonomy is ceded, priorities shrink. At home, memory becomes a refuge. Painters and writers look backward to golden ages of conquest and faith. Politics is haunted by nostalgia, by the conviction that decline must be the work of enemies, or divine displeasure, or moral decay, anything except the structure of an economy that confused money with wealth for too long. Yet beneath the myths, the mechanism is simple. Unearned income broke the link between effort and reward. Bullion allowed Spain to live beyond the capacity of its farms, workshops, and traders. Inflation punished workers and rewarded those closest to the flow of coin. Easy credit encouraged rulers to mortgage the future for present glory repeated. Defaults shattered trust. Debased money hollowed out daily life, and all the while, other societies took the same silver and tied it to ships, tools, factories, laws, and ideas. This pattern did not die with the Spanish Empire. Today, the resource curse plays out in oil fields, gas pipelines, rare earth mines. Countries awash in commodity windfalls see their currencies rise, their imports swell, their domestic industries wither. Politicians discover that it is easier to distribute rents than to foster productivity. Elites cluster around the tap. Debts are incurred on the assumption that the stream will never run dry. The vocabulary has changed. The logic has not. Spain's fate is a reminder carved in history. Money is not wealth. It is a claim on wealth, a token that only has meaning if there is real productive capacity behind it. An empire can drown in gold and still starve. A state can control the world's currency and still lack the factories, farms, and skills that make strength real. In the end, Spain did not simply lose an empire. It exported its fortune and kept the scars: empty towns, brittle institutions, and a long, slow slide into the role of spectator as others took the stage it once dominated. The mountain that should have secured its future instead financed the rise of its rivals. This has been the empire that died of wealth, how gold destroyed Spain. A story of a mountain, a monarchy, and a mistake repeated across centuries, whenever money is worshipped and real work is ignored. Subscribe to Cinematic Empire Chronicles to stay ahead of the stories shaping our world, because the next empire to drown in its own fortune may not recognize the pattern until it is already sinking before the pattern repeats.